both crypto and longevity are like very much at the bleeding edge of human innovation and technology. Like both have the potential to fundamentally change how the human society operates.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. As Oliver mentioned, this panel is going to dive into the intersection between the emerging fields of crypto and longevity research and the ways in which they may be growing together. To quickly introduce the panelists with a little bit more information, joining us for this discussion is Marc Bernegger, board member of Crypto Finance AG, the Swiss Blockchain Federation, and CFC St. Moritz. Marc is a serial entrepreneur, first co-founding the entertainment platform Usgang in his 20s, and most recently co-founding the longevity company builder Maximon. Welcome, Marc. And Qiao Wang, mathematician, crypto enthusiast, and ardent proponent of decentralized finance, being a partner at the DeFi Alliance accelerator platform and former director of product at Masari Crypto. Welcome, Qiao.
Thank you, Keith.
Great. So to start things off, our audience being focused on longevity research is likely not fully aware of blockchain and what it's capable of, beyond Bitcoin transactions. So can we give a quick summary of what crypto actually is and how it can relate to our field? I guess, Qiao, I guess we could start with you.
Yeah, the way I think about crypto is you can think of it as a very large decentralized computing system. It's a bunch of computers that try to make some computations and write some data into this distributed ledger. And the data that's written there is basically stored in a redundant way across all these different nodes or computers. And the way that these data sets are guaranteed to be exactly the same across these computers is via decentralized consensus. And decentralized consensus is basically the most important breakthrough, starting with Bitcoin and later with Ethereum and all that. Like it's at the core of crypto. Over the years, we've seen several different categories of applications. The first one being big one, which is money. Later, we saw many different types of financial applications built on Ethereum. So like trading platforms, lending platforms, payments, etc. And more recently, we saw a bunch of new innovations in like social media, like decentralized social media, art, even, digital art, what we call NFTs, non-fungible tokens, and a bunch of others. I think longevity and health is something that people haven't really explored a lot, but it's something that I've been thinking a lot recently. I think there's a very interesting intersection between health data and crypto, because at the end of the day, crypto is a distributed computer that tries to store and compute some data into this ledger. So we can talk about that a little bit later, but I'm super passionate about this space.
Great. Yes, we'll definitely hit the health data topic later, but on that subject, maybe over to Marc. So, Qiao was mentioning some aspects that have to do with finance, right? But there's some other things besides that in health data that crypto may be useful for, like governance, et cetera. Can you speak, Marc, about maybe some of the other aspects that you may have dealt with in your advisement of the World Economic Forum and the Swiss Federation, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to go a step back, besides the term crypto, which is nowadays widely used, there's the technology blockchain, which is ultimately a decentralized system, as Qiao already elaborated. And I think the use cases go nowadays far further than just money. I personally still think the biggest and maybe also by far most relevant is money and the Bitcoin related developments. But besides that, because of the uniqueness and the power of a decentralized immutable system, you can go far further, right? And I think especially when you have science related activities involved, blockchain-based system, which is ultimately interconnecting to all these different players in the field, might also be a huge game changer, which is maybe at this stage not yet really explored in an extent we will see in the next few years.
Absolutely. One aspect that I'm personally interested in, given that lifespan.io does crowdfunding, is how blockchain and cryptocurrency can kind of open up sort of new forms of crowdfunding, like quadratic funding, right? Basically smarter matching donations with smart contracts, basically automated ways to do this. And maybe to kick back to Qiao for a second, I know in some of your Twitter posts, you've mentioned how there's going to be a confluence of, like social media tokens and gaming and all that stuff. So do we see a way of how that can be sort of integrated with the longevity movement as sort of like an outreach endeavor, as a joking example, kind of what's going on with Stoner Cats right now, which is a marijuana-based NFT that's being used to kind of build up the community, and it's kind of funny. So open question.
Yeah, there are many ways we can dive into this question, but like maybe the most relevant way in which the two are compatible, like longevity and crypto are compatible and complementary to each other, is that I personally feel like right now there's way too much money in crypto, and there's not enough money in longevity. So at the same time, almost every single crypto person I know is really deep in health and longevity and like taking care of themselves. What is the thing after, like what is the most important thing for you after you've made reasonable amount of money and wealth and financial freedom? Like what is the next most important thing? It's time, it's your health, right? So a lot of crypto people are really into this, and I personally helped seeded a couple of longevity or biotech companies, and I think in general, like longevity and biotech startups should really try to raise money from crypto people. Like there's just a natural fit in terms of funding, capital, and personal interest. So that's one thing. That's the funding side of things. The other thing, like maybe it's the start of a trend that I noticed recently, which is using crypto networks as some sort of community engagement. So I saw, I chatted with the leadership team at the Methuselah Foundation, which Marc also, by the way, mentioned in one of his recent articles. But what they're looking at is, I think they got a bunch of donations from like of this new crypto token called Elon, Doge Elon. It was worth a lot of money. So obviously they can use that money for funding, but also they can use that token to engage the community. Like basically, the holders of this token, they have an incentive to create value for this token, and therefore potentially attract other people who might be interested in helping with the Methuselah Foundation to participate in some endeavors of the foundation. It's still very early. But I can see the start of a trend of longevity startups or foundations using crypto networks as a way to engage in the community and to attract more people into their mission. So these are the two main things that I'm seeing so far.
That makes sense. So that's a good segue, I guess, over to Marc. Given that at Maximon you're setting up a longevity company builder, right? So maybe we could talk about it a little bit, what that means, and apropos to the point here, are you thinking of any ways to integrate blockchain into that process?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, what I can definitely already say without going too much into detail at this stage, that we have a few very well-known, very successful people from the digital asset space which are involved in the background in our activities. So that's maybe another example, a very concrete one, where we see these two worlds coming together. I mean, at this stage, as we are in the early stage and process of setting up Maximon, we go a little bit for the low-hanging fruit. So we have two companies in the making, one in the longevity supplement space and one literally like a concierge service for, at the first stage, more wealthy individuals, guiding them into this new exciting world. So that's why we are, let's say, focusing a little bit on the basics. But going forward, I think there are definitely quite a few interesting ways where blockchain could become quite relevant. I'm personally quite straightforward when it comes to the use of these technologies. I mean, if you only use blockchain to solve a problem which is not existing, I don't think it makes sense to focus too much on how to implement blockchain, but I'm quite sure going forward that this technology will enable us also new exciting business models, which are, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit later, also emerging in general in the market. VitaDAO is one of the examples. But at this stage, I would say our main connection to the crypto space is mainly, as also Qiao elaborated, some of these quite wealthy individuals, which are now dedicating far more time into health in general, but also longevity related projects. And I think that's great for both industries, because maybe it also makes part of the crypto industry a little bit more sustainable and having a little bit the broader vision. And I think that's why the two worlds have a natural match, which will become far more visible in the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, one area where I'm interested in is there's a lot of sort of issues, I guess you'd say, with, healthcare data interoperability and kind of drop the balls with how clinical trials work in the modern era. Right now, I think we can definitely benefit from almost like combinatorial style clinical trials that have cohorts of hundreds of thousands of people with crowdsourcing. And I'm very interested to see what I would like to build over the next couple of years is sort of like a Lifespan.io 2.0 or Web 3.0 version that sort of integrates not just quadratic funding, but this sort of ability to exchange data, which could also really make people feel involved and have agency. So maybe this is a conversation we can follow up on later, because I'm very a big believer that this is the future. But given what we just talked about, I think there's a segue in there to one of the other questions that I have here, which I'll start off by kicking back to Qiao. So I believe on your earlier Twitter posts, Qiao, you had mentioned at one point how the intersection of longevity and crypto sort of goes all the way back to the birth of crypto, for example, with Hal Finney, receiver of the first Bitcoin transaction in 2009, undergoing cryopreservation upon his death in 2014 of ALS. Why do we think that these two areas seem to attract the same people? What is the common spirit here?
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously there's a historical reason. Hal Finney, alongside some other crypto OGs or Bitcoin OGs, are just, I guess, very being into this intersection of both fields for a long time. So that's the historical reason. But it's also because of the fact that both crypto and longevity are like very much at the bleeding edge of human innovation and technology. Like both have the potential to fundamentally change how the human society operates, right? Like crypto decentralizes a lot of activities, removing the middleman, and that just have tremendous amount of impact. And then longevity, assuming we can live like maybe a few decades longer, right? It means that people would be able to think much longer, plan for much longer. Instead of planning for like the next decade, you can plan for the next 5 decades. And that allows us to do much greater things, much higher, riskier things, right? So these two fields fundamentally are at the bleeding edge, and that naturally just attract the same group of people, right? So that's another thing. And the third point is, I would say, interestingly, both fields face a similar set of challenges, which is regulatory. So crypto is challenging the incumbents, and therefore, especially the financial and banking incumbents, and therefore it's facing a ton of regulatory challenges and pressure. Like even right now, we're seeing it basically starting the beginning of this year, and it's only going to get harder and harder for crypto. And we're doing a lot of work to push back on the negative, non-innovation friendly kind of regulations and policies. I think I'm seeing sort of the same thing with longevity or biotech health in general. There seems to be a lot of things that ultimately depend on how the regulations want or regulators want this field to progress in the future. But anyway, so I think the regulatory challenges, the historical precedent, as well as the very bleeding edge nature of these two fields are the main reasons why it's attracting the same set of people.
Makes sense.
And maybe from my side to add, I think it's very well explained, and also an interesting fact that ultimately, as soon as you dig a little bit deeper into these two industries, I mean, the famous Bitcoin rabbit hole, right, and similar to longevity, it just also changes, I think, your perspective in a quite massive way, right? Because as Qiao also explained, realizing that maybe we live all together far longer in a healthier and happier way, and additionally, crypto is maybe changing the way how we look at the monetary system, how we look at the traditional financial services system with all these incumbents and historically grown structures, which are maybe in a certain extent not really how they should work in a world today. So these two elements changing in a massive way the perspective of people looking into these two industries, maybe also bring together a certain type of individuals, right? So, and I always have to say, most people I meet and met so far interested in both worlds are normally very exciting and interesting people to talk to them, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I very much agree with the sentiments you guys are sharing, where to me, the connection is basically transcending limitations, the desire to transcend limitations, be it financial or biological, right? And freedom, self-direction. One thing that you just made me think of when you were speaking is not really squarely on topic, but just a little tangent. Sometimes people see, rejuvenation research as like opposed to religious ideas, and there's a conflict there. But this idea of long-term thinking, I think, is a nice way to potentially tie everything together. Because if you think about one of the things that was present in like the old world is that, people would work on a church that would take like 300 years to build because they believed in something that was longer than themselves, right? And I think we've kind of lost that a little bit in modern society, but perhaps life extension can help sort of bring that back. Like maybe you'll be a better steward of the earth if you think you're going to be around for 200 years, for example. Anyway, bit of a tangent. To tie it back to the topic, there was a bit of a discussion there on regulation. So I'd like to kick it up to Marc to see. Yeah, it's no secret that regulation can sort of be a bottleneck here. Marc, in your dealings, you could take this question from either the crypto or the longevity side. Do you think the roadblocks that we have to overcome regulation-wise are due to sort of like, willful opposition or the calcification of an old system?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, and I mean, I founded my first internet company back in '99, and it's interesting to see how similar certain of the developments in the crypto space are happening as we speak, right? And normally I'm a big believer in technology and human innovation and technological progress, and it's quite difficult to stop that by using laws or certain rules or some compliance frameworks, right? As long as you somehow understand the consequences. So that's why I'm a big believer, even if you have powerful counterparties, that innovation can't be stopped, especially on the long run. There's always certain pitfalls, and I mean, especially the last few weeks were extremely exciting to see what happened in the US Senate when it came to crypto regulation, right? But I think it's a natural development, especially also bringing the incumbents and maybe also some more traditional investors into a new field, that they need some clarity. Maybe they also need rules and regulation to understand the real power of new technological advantages. So that's why, even if it's a big threat, I'm quite confident that, especially on the long run, these regulatory frameworks won't really stop the developments in these two worlds, right?
Right. So on that subject, since you brought up the US, in countries without universal healthcare, such as the United States, there's a rising issue of medical bankruptcies and people dying simply because they don't have healthcare coverage. I believe something like 60,000 Americans annually. Qiao, is there any work being done to create a sort of, DeFi equivalent or decentralized finance equivalent of healthcare insurance for countries that need this? And if so, are there ways to build concepts like the longevity dividend into their fabric?
This is actually an interesting concept. I've never thought of it, and I've never encountered a team that's trying to build. I guess maybe a couple, but I don't know the details. But it's certainly a very interesting concept of using potentially crypto to help with healthcare. I need to think a little bit deeper on that, but I do think that there's a very interesting intersection between crypto and healthcare to the extent that, like for instance, right now in the US, I see many different doctors for different reasons, and I move around a lot. So every time I move, I see a new doctor. And every single one of these doctors has a piece of my data, but they don't have the overall picture. In other words, my health data is very siloed. And I think it's also the case for basically everybody. The consequence for that is I feel like, you know, I really love reading like scientific papers on health and longevity and biotech in general. Every time, like most of the time I read a paper and I see a data set of like 30, 40, 50 individuals, I'm like, this is not, the data is just not enough, it's not big enough to make a conclusive, you know, to draw a conclusion. So I would really love us to get into a world where, you know, our health data, individual health data are stored in a global distributed ledger. In other words, crypto, which at the same time is protected in terms of privacy. So using technologies like zero knowledge proofs, right? So basically anyone who wants to use this data, they don't know the individual behind those data, but they know the aggregate data. So they can look at the aggregate data and build some models, do some machine learning on top of it to find interesting insights, or, you know, do like help with the clinical trials, stuff like that, without knowing the precise individuals behind the data. I really love to see a world like that. I think that's going to be really interesting.
Now, Marc, can you add an international perspective to this? Because I know certain countries are ahead of the US in particular on this kind of.
No, I mean, I think it's personally, I also, I couldn't mention a concrete case doing exactly that, but I think it would be a huge business case, right? And now it's again a very regulatory issue, right? I mean, I think in most countries, especially here in Europe, because of certain data privacy rules, you wouldn't be allowed to collect this data. But if you can anonymize it with a blockchain-based system behind, where you ultimately just collect the data without pointing it directly to each individual patient, it would be a huge case, right? And then referring to other countries, especially let's name it China, they have all the data, they collect it, and I think they have a different understanding how they want to use the data, with the effect that you ultimately have far more information. So sometimes changing the regulatory framework could really, be a big game changer in this field. So I think, again, if more politicians and policymakers understand that there's not the idea to track everybody, but to really have this data in for the benefit of the whole society, that would be big step into the right direction, right? So in this case, I would even say that the right regulatory framework would create a completely new industry and completely new business cases.
Absolutely. One of the areas that I think makes this very timely with the pandemic is the subject of biomarkers. And this is an area where I'm personally very interested and have done some work in. So I'm not expecting you both to have fully formed ideas here, because I'm just going to kind of spitball. But kind of one aspect here is that, let's say, there are currently like machine learning based detectors for COVID-19 based on physiological data, like voice, for example, that if deployed ubiquitously could just shut down pandemics like this rapidly. But one of the reasons why they don't sort of arise is, of course, fears of misuse of such data and Big Brother. I have some thoughts, but I want to hear yours. What are the ways that you think blockchain can help solve this problem through the creation of privacy preserving data marketplaces that would allow this sort of machine learning, model to be crowdsourced and created and iterated on?
I mean, I can go first. I think the idea is extremely appealing, and it's really about educating ultimately the end user that there's no hidden agenda behind. And I think the big advantage of a blockchain crypto-based system is that you don't have a middleman, which is normally a company or a government, but it's a technology. And I hope that this is one of the reasons, but I mean, we all know that a lot of people also don't believe in technology. So they rather have politicians deciding what's right or wrong for them. But I could imagine that if you fully understand the power of a blockchain-based system, which ultimately could prevent certain developments we saw recently, that would be a massive step into the right direction, right? And it's also interesting. I'm personally invested in a company which is exactly doing that. They track your data using the smartphone, and your moves slightly change when you are getting closer to have symptoms of Alzheimer's, as example. And they never see any of the patients, so purely on your behavior, they can save you a few more years for the ways to treat as far as possible the symptoms of Alzheimer. And I think that's a huge game changer, right? And everybody of us has a device which is capable of doing things which would go far further than we could ever expect. But for mainly certain regulatory and compliant reasons, we're not yet using it to the full extent, which is ultimately a pity, I would say.
Right. Yeah. As a good natural tie-in there, the work that I had mentioned with COVID-19 and voice was actually based off of original work for Alzheimer's detection of voice. So it's all connected.
Yeah.
Qiao, on that subject, in particular to the issue of people being scared of their data getting in the wrong hands, how do you think, in particular, blockchain can be used, or what are there ways to do that in a way that you could share your data and be confident that it's not being misused?
So I mentioned this a few minutes ago, but like this technology called zero knowledge proof, it's such a mind-boggling technology, and it's so underappreciated. Right now, basically the only well-known crypto project that uses crypto or zero knowledge proof is this this project called Zcash, and basically the way zero knowledge proof. Actually, I'll explain that in a bit, but this technology is so bleeding edge that the founders of Zcash don't even claim that they don't even understand it. But it's so amazing because basically, let's say you have some health data and you apply zero knowledge proof, you can selectively reveal the data to other people. So let's say there's some data that you want to stay that you want them to stay private, like for instance your first name, last name, age, whatever, like something that can uniquely identifies you. You want that to be anonymous. And then there's some data that's related to your biomarkers, right? Like related to COVID, a bunch of those data that you want to reveal to the public, right? You can selectively do that in such a way that, when the researchers look at this data, they don't know your first name, last name, age, whatever, like the stuff that uniquely identifies you, but they know, they have a very large data set of those biomarkers, and they can run models on top of that without knowing who exactly is behind this data. That's the beauty of zero knowledge proof. And on the surface, it seems that it has nothing to do with crypto because it's just a privacy technology. But the reason why it's fundamentally compatible with crypto is that crypto is a distributed ledger. Everyone and no one really owns this data. If you had this data in a private, like, with your doctor, right, or like with a private lab, they really own this data. They can see exactly who has what data. So zero knowledge proof doesn't really apply there. But when you have a distributed ledger, a global distributed ledger that everyone stores and also no one really stores, then this privacy technology really applies there. So that's where like the intersection of privacy, crypto, and health data can be really powerful. That said, I think zero knowledge proof, again, like zero knowledge proof is so bleeding edge that we're probably still a few years away from like having a critical mass of people who really understand this, and who are also passionate about health and passionate about crypto, that they're able to mix the three together and build something really powerful.
Yeah, I like the example because it's again, I mean, Zcash, let's say for the people not really very familiar with it, is normally something you hear when it comes to bad activities in the internet, right? But if you really dig a little bit deeper, especially into the technology, it goes so much further. And again, I think we're just in the very early days, so most people didn't really understand that it's not about doing bad activities in the internet, like in the early days when everybody thought when you do something with this bad web, you're selling drugs or guns, but maybe we'll just build another sustainable huge industry, right? And I think that's very similar when it comes to the impact of crypto on longevity in the future.
Yeah, what I would like to see, I don't know exactly how feasible it is, but, you know, I can't remember the details, but there was like this study a few years ago that was basically like, how much money does Facebook actually like get out of you from like all the ads it's shown you throughout your life? And it was something like shockingly low, like $12 or something like that. And then it posed the question of like, what would the world look like if instead you owned your own data and you could sell it to Facebook, you know, access to it? So I'm wondering, I believe Estonia with what they're doing with their healthcare records is almost kind of teeing up something like that, where you'd get like a notification like, hey, you know, this company would like to use your data in a study, allow them, yes or no. So it's only like one step further from that point to basically allowing us to have control and ownership of our own healthcare data and be able to choose what we want to do with it, which would be pretty amazing. Again, I'm not sure sure that'll take a little while. It's difficult, I'm sure. But I want to circle back to the question of what Qiao had said earlier of, you know, there's a lot of money in crypto, not enough money in life extension, which is obviously a sentiment I agree with. So, you know, feel free to please give us the monies. But in general, from your perspective, given that situation, what advice do you have, either of you or both of you, for our community? How can we engage the crypto community more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, it's happening as we speak, right? You cover the subject at your event, which is definitely not a crypto event, but I think having formats like that, bridging a little bit these two worlds, is a first step into the right direction. I was approached by quite a few friends of my crypto network, which are not really very much into longevity, and they I don't know if they're really listening, but at least they say they wanted to follow our discussion, because they somehow, maybe they think they understand longevity better when they hear it from people with a certain crypto background. But I think that's a first step, right? That you somehow, bring these two worlds together, and maybe on events like yours. So I think that's already a very helpful way to get more money from crypto people in exciting longevity ventures.
Great. One, or Qiao, do you have any follow-ups to that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I think, you know, in order to get funding, perhaps like the step before that is changing the public perception. Like every time I tweet about, like 10 years ago, if I tweeted about crypto, people would laugh at me. But now if I tweet about longevity, there's still people laughing at me. So like the public perception, I feel like it's not there yet. Like I think, you know, people who are working full-time in this space, in the longevity space, maybe spend more time, you know, tweeting about their research, why it's important to work in this space, like really help shape the public perception of this field. So that's number one. And two is, you know, anyone who, I guess, you know, who works in space, just go and actively seek, you know, engage with the crypto people. Like for instance, I'm part of your investors network, Keith, lifespan.io. I forgot how I learned, like, I think I learned about it through a friend of mine who's into both crypto and longevity. But I would love for you to like, maybe like just do more marketing like towards crypto people. There, like I refer your network to my crypto friends, to quite a few of my crypto friends, but like, I'm only a small part of that. So like, you know, marketing, like active marketing promotion could work there as well.
Great. Well, that's good to know that would be useful. And, you know, just sort of open call there, doing more marketing to the crypto community and in general, something that we want to do. And, you know, we need hands to do that. So anybody out there who has that expertise, including also, you know, crypto expertise, as mentioned, we want to eventually build, you know, Web 3.0 version of the site. So, you know, any people in the community that have that shared interest, definitely reach out to me because we want to move in that direction. On that subject of marketing, one area that I would like to move into, if I could get the time to, that I see as like a real open opportunity for exactly this is, you know, YouTube. Like right now, you know, crypto is kind of having its moment in YouTube. There's a lot of, you know, YouTube celebrities out there with million subscribers talking about crypto. And I think it would be very easy to bring those people into our ecosystem. And there are these past like fundraiser events on the internet with the gaming community. There's a company called Extra Life. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, where they basically do the internet equivalent of like Race for the Cure, you know, decentralized. Everyone does their own race for cancer or whatever, but they're doing it with like Twitch streams or whatever. You know, we're going to raise money while we watch me play a video game, right? And these fundraisers typically raise, you know, tens of millions of dollars. And I think there's a way to kind of thread that needle and make a crypto facilitated version of that, where we have a couple of these main, you know, crypto celebrities streaming for life extension research and educating the public. So there's a couple of steps there, but I see a real like opportunity marketing wise to do something like that, which I'd be happy to work on if anybody wants to work on it with me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, as Qiao mentioned, I think when you talked about Bitcoin and digital assets in 2011 or 12, people thought you're nuts, right? And now the same stuff explained by people which didn't even know what Bitcoin is 5 years ago is now going viral on social media. I mean, it also just needs some more time, I guess. I mean, the fact that you have more and more people moving into the longevity field shows that there's maybe a certain tipping point. But I think we're still a little bit in a phase like in the very early days of digital assets, right? And so that's why I'm quite confident that, yeah, we will see far accelerated developments in the next few months and years.
I want to pivot this question back to more, still with crypto, but more, you know, traditional investment, not on the internet, like crowdsourcing, what I was just talking about. What I believe, Mark, in one of your earlier interviews in 2017, I believe you were speaking about how you were on the investment side, a conservative investor, you know, looking more for like near-term business models, you know, rather than anticipating a disruption in 10 years, et cetera, right? And I imagine many investors are like that. Longevity, in some sense, is partially an antithesis to this because it's a very much long time horizons. You know, it might take 10 years for this company that we're investing in for the drug to work, et cetera. Do you still hold that view? And if so, how do you square that? How can we bring along other more traditional conservative investors to this table, given that longer time horizon?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, as an entrepreneur, as already mentioned, I started with my internet in business in 1999. I explored Bitcoin in 2012. So as always, I would say too early or a little bit too early before something became a real business case. And that's why as an investor, maybe you try to be better on the timing, because, you know, if you're too early, sometimes yeah, you have to wait too long, and maybe other ones come a little bit later, but have the ideal time frame. And that's maybe also one of the reasons, at least at this stage at Maximum, where we say we want to start with business cases where we have a short-term way for substantial revenue. So ideally, we build companies where we have already in the first few months tangible, real, traditional, boring, as you may call it, business model with revenues, and not just focus on the moonshots. But going forward, that will definitely change. But I think what always helps, especially for outsiders and traditional investors, that they realize that the crazy new industry is not just interesting in a 10 to 20 years perspective, but you really have revenue making companies as we speak, right? And that's happening extremely in crypto when you look at all these numbers of these sometimes very small players just a few years ago. And I hope we will see very similar developments in longevity, so we can then also talk about numbers and revenues and not just about potential ways why this is an interesting company based on research and science, right?
That makes sense. Qiao, do you see any issue there with a potential slight discord between the sometimes longer time horizon on some of these therapies and the ups and downs of crypto that can swing 50% on a day?
I think one of the main reasons why crypto got to where it is today is this short-term fluctuation, for better or worse, because it really gathers a lot of attention. Like, all these YouTube videos that you just mentioned, like, people do these things because they can make quick money, right? It's both good and bad. I think one thing I thought about recently was like, is there a way to apply the same sort of token economics to longevity, especially, or even to scientific research in general? Because it's very hard for a postdoc researcher to get funding for their research, because it takes such a long time to see the fruits of their research, and investors are very risk averse. They're also in general, like a shorter time horizon, in terms shorter term in terms of investment horizon. Is there a way to tokenize research in a way that before it actually delivers any tangible outcome, such as an actual drug that's in production, that passes all the trials in production? Is there a way to speculate on these potential outcome of this research? So basically adding the short-term sort of speculative effect. I know it doesn't sound great because it's a little bit like financial speculation-ish, but it does attract a lot more attention, and attention is good. Attention grabs new talent. It attracts funding, and it creates this nice flywheel effect. So something that people could, I guess, try to think about.
Yeah, I really like the idea. Maybe just to add, I mean, one of the reasons why crypto became so widely known is that everybody literally is able to get into it, right? I mean, even all the smally, tiny, not very sustainable coins sometimes have a huge audience and fan base, because literally you open a wallet and you also don't need that much money, right? Literally you can start with your pocket money. And I think a lot of these developments are not sustainable, and that's why maybe also something which will change in the future, which is good. But as Qiao elaborated, I mean, ultimately that brought this huge attention, right? And with longevity, it's quite difficult if you're not a molecular scientist to, at the first stage, understand what's really happening. And if you somehow understand the basics, you have not that many ways to somehow get into the field. I mean, you can go to platforms like yours, Keith, and you do a great job in educating also the broader audience, right? But it's really difficult to somehow get into this new exciting world. And that's why, yeah, we should definitely somehow think about how we can use these triggers which made crypto so popular in longevity.
No, it's a really interesting idea. I'm gonna have to sit and think about it for a while, but just again, spitballing, I can imagine that you could come up with some system where by contributing biomarker data, maybe you get a token, or you mint an NFT by the process of doing that then is redeemable for access to the therapy whenever it becomes available, or something like that. I'm sure we could brainstorm it, but something can happen there. I'm not sure what, but something.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, well, we'll follow up after.
Yeah.
But I think now we're coming up near the end, so I want to go to some questions that we have from the audience, and if we go a few minutes extra, that's okay. But one question that I see here from the audience is, are there ways that crypto can help longevity entrepreneurs in particular to raise capital for their companies besides just investment from the newly wealthy?
Yeah, I think that goes a little bit into the direction we just elaborated, right? I mean, maybe it would really make sense to take some of the learnings and the key success drivers of the whole crypto industry, and so how implement and adapt it. I mean, what's definitely very unique, and sometimes also in a too extreme manner, but a lot of these projects are really extremely well marketed, right? I mean, in the fancy ICO days, you had all these Telegram groups. I thought sometimes they do better investor relations than a lot of well-known stock-listed companies, right? So they were really interacting with their audience. They explained what the business model behind is. Even most of the companies then failed, but at least there was a really professional structure to somehow interact with the public, right? And I would imagine that's a very straightforward thing, that's maybe something missing, because you normally don't have the heavy marketing guys involved in these longevity projects. And I could imagine that this is a very easy and straightforward way to take some of the learnings from the crypto industry and implement it as we speak in your own company in the longevity field.
That makes sense. Qiao?
I don't know if people has heard of VitaDAO. Marc mentioned it a little bit earlier, but they raised like $5 million. You know, by crypto standards is okay. By longevity standard, it's crazily high, right? Like this DAO thing, right? Like a DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organization, is a way for people around the internet to you know, raise some money, organize, coordinate you know, economic transfer and allocation of resources. More specifically, potentially investing, right? You know, VitaDAO might be the only one, the only DAO that sits at the intersection of crypto and longevity I've heard so far. And even then, they're focusing on very specific problems. They're not really focusing on like more broad like investment. But I would love for, you know, longevity researchers or entrepreneurs to get in touch with, you know, crypto experts to launch a DAO of some sort that that basically allocates resources, potentially invests in new startups. So you know, that could be a potential area of interest.
Great. I'm glad you brought that up, Qiao, because you know, VitaDAO is excellent. Full disclosure, I'm one of their working groups, longevity working group. You know, so they're focused squarely on sort of decentralizing, you know, ownership of longevity IP essentially, which is very interesting. And I'm very excited to see where that goes in the future, because in addition to just the financial aspect of it, you mentioned DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. Another natural aspect of that, for those of you unfamiliar with the concept, you could basically just think of it as a, you know, decentralized company, you know, that's, you know, where everyone is voting on what to do together. And I'm sure that's not the best definition in the world. But the point is, a system like that allows people to have agency and feel like they're part of a greater movement and actually deciding how things are going, right? Which is something I believe people feel very strongly about when it comes to their health data, right? So very interested in that. That could be a whole other conversation. But there's one more question in the chat, and I'm going to combine it with one of my own, which is what directions of longevity research do you personally find the most interesting? And I'm going to pair that with another question of, because I'm sure our audience would be interested, how did you in particular first get exposed to longevity research? Start with Qiao, I guess.
I guess I got exposed to the longevity field. I mean, depending on the definition, but like at some point I realized, you know, living longer is the same as living healthier. So by that definition, I've been into this space for many years, but it's only really until like maybe the last couple of years that I start spending time like reading like actual research, getting a little bit deeper, like deeper than just, you know, eating healthy, you know, sleeping well, that kind of stuff, but stuff that's a little bit more bleeding edge. Like it's a very gradual process. There was not a single catalyst that got me into this. In terms of the areas I'm most excited about, frankly, I'm still a total noob. I don't want to say silly things, but I'm interested in whatever that, you know, some of the leading experts I respect a lot. Like I'm interested in what those people are saying and researching in. So I guess, you know, genetic editing, like some drug development, you know, damage repair, that kind of stuff. But I'm still a student at this point.
It's perfectly fine. I'm sure you will hopefully have much time to gain more of understanding there. Marc, how about you?
I mean, my first interaction was, I think, 2011 at the conference where I met Aubrey de Grey. So he was literally the eye opener for me. And then was at Singularity University also quite a few years ago, and realized that it's far more than just interesting content during a conference, right? And digged a little bit deeper into the whole field. I mean, similar to Bitcoin in the early days, you sometimes hear about something and maybe it sounds a little bit too good to be true, right? So maybe, yeah, you need some additional inputs. And I think similar to the discussion we just had, the deeper you dig into the whole field and realize that it's mostly science-based. So it's not just the idea of a few people which are evangelists of the idea. It's really happening in the labs based purely on science, on research. And that, yeah, ultimately I think has the same effect of everybody, that you get more and more fascinated and excited about the whole space and get deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole.
Makes sense to me. One of my stock jokes that I frequently use is if you're a person of many interests and life extension is one of them, probably makes sense to work on that one first, right? But with that, I think we're about coming up to the end. So I just want to kick the floor to you one last time. If you have any kind of closing final statements, blue sky dreams for the community, what do you want to leave the audience with? I guess, Marc, we can start with you.
Yeah, as mentioned, I think it's great that you, Keith, put together a panel about the subject. I think we will see far more people from both industries coming together and build great, exciting companies. And I'm already looking forward where we stand in a year from now, because I think, as I mentioned, we're in the right time frame and maybe at a certain tipping point when it comes to the real tangible elements of longevity. And I'm already very much looking forward and hope that more crypto people will also join this exciting journey.
Absolutely. Tell your friends. Qiao, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I shared the same sentiment. Like, I really think there's something there between the two communities. I'm not saying this to hype it up or anything like that. I really think, for a variety of reasons, for like historical precedents, in terms of like the type of people that both fields attract, the types of challenges, right? And the fact that longevity really reminds me of the early days of crypto. Like, for all these reasons, I think, the intersection of the two is just going to get bigger and bigger in the coming years. I really believe this.
Absolutely. And as you can probably tell from this call, I fully drunk the Kool-Aid of both crypto and longevity, and really do see potentially wonderful things. I think the most important thing, or the biggest roadblock, is sort of how we convince the public that there's an okay way to share all of our data in this amazing way. And I'm really optimistic that blockchain can help that. And hopefully we're setting up for an amazing decade that will be much better than the last couple of years, hopefully. And thank you both for participating. And I'd like to thank the audience as well, and our sponsors and everyone at Lifespan.io, our heroes who make all this possible. So thank you once again for an excellent conversation. I hope everyone enjoys the rest of the conference.